Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute. I'm going to give people another minute or two to get fully logged on, although it looks like most folks are here already. And then we'll go ahead and get started in just a minute. I'm just going to go get myself some water to make sure I have that, and then we'll get started. Thanks, everyone. All right, it looks like most folks are here, so we're going ahead and get started. So we're going to talk a bit about closure and closure best practices today. For those of you who haven't been on these webinars before, I see a few new names. I try to keep them to about 45 minutes or so, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, and we'll leave time for questions at the end. If you do have questions while we're going, you can feel free to put them into the question box, and we will address them either as we go or at the very end. Awesome. Let's get started then. So a bit about me. My name is Jack Kavanaugh. I'm the Director of Training and Program Development for Mentor New York. Mentor New York is the New York State affiliate of Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. So we serve youth mentoring and youth development programs around the state through training, consulting, webinars, all sorts of things. So we don't run programming ourselves. Instead, we support those who do. My background is in social work, and I've worked in youth programming for about 15 years now, between after school programs, summer camps, schools, different CBOs, mentoring programs, things like that. I am based in our Western New York office, so I'm based in Buffalo. We do also have an office, our main office is in New York City, as well as an office on Long Island. So this is what we're going to go over today. First, why closure occurs, who to inform and when, setting a timeline, processing the match experience with mentor and mentee, celebrating the relationship, saying thank you for joining us, and what's next for the mentee. And then at the end, we'll save a little bit of time for questions. So if you want to put in the question box just to get a sense from you guys, how are you feeling right now? What's something good that happened this week and something challenging? So you can put something in the question box. I'll give you a few minutes to respond. I see a few answers coming in. I'll wait for a few more. So it seems like a lot of people are glad about the weather. I can appreciate that. It's a little rainy here today, but it was really nice this week. Folks being able to get outside. A lot of people feeling anxious about things that, starting the new school year and things like that, which I can certainly appreciate. And those are the time of year where the summer programs are all kind of winding down, or mostly wound down by now, and all the school year programs are starting to ramp up. So it can be a lot. There's one person, I'm assuming this is a good thing that happened today, but made a new match with the team, said the reason he wanted a mentor was so that he could learn to be a good dad. I think that's great. I think that's great. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, everybody. And so now you know where the question box is. So if you have questions, like I said, feel free to put them in there as we go. So let's talk a bit about why mentoring ends. So, at some point, the mentoring relationship comes to an end. One reason could be a mentor and mentee are not compatible. And so that might be during the match, right? That you might, a month or two in, you just kind of see that these are two people who just aren't able to work together, right? That definitely happens. A mentor or the mentee leaves the program. Sometimes that's because, they're not a good fit and you have to make the judgment call to have them not be part of the program anymore. And that's, always tough for everybody. And sometimes it's because, life just kind of happens and people have to get in the way. Life gets in the way and people have to kind of move on and things like that. So that can be really tricky. Individual life circumstances, we brought that up, but sometimes it's not even them leaving the program, but just having to take a step back for a little bit. It can be sudden, it could be planned, oh, I know I'm moving, or health issues, things like that really come up a lot. Particularly now, I think, but what I've seen over the past few months is a lot of people kind of recalibrating their expectations and time commitments that they're able to make to each other. And it's been, I think, a trying time for a lot of programs, especially around a lot of unanticipated closures. So the mentee reaches a level of self-sufficiency and no longer needs the mentor, so they kind of graduate out of the program. And sometimes that happens planned if you run a year-long program. They graduate out. Sometimes that happens, especially for programs that don't have a clear start and beginning. So, if you're not running a year-based or calendar year-based or school year-based or a program like that, or even programs that are just, ongoing. So, for example, Big Brothers Big Sisters as a program, it doesn't really have like a start and end date, right? It just keeps going. And so for some programs, like I worked with one program that was really focused on mentoring young people through who are experiencing homelessness, transitioning into independent living. And so, at a certain point, they were able to ramp up enough of those independent living skills that they just didn't need a mentor anymore. And it happened very organically. They just reached a point where they said, you know what, I think I'm pretty much all set with this. Like, I feel confident. I'm glad to, you helped me, but, I'm able to move on. So when closure is going to happen, it should be coordinated with the program manager. So whoever, when a mentor or mentee are dealing with either unanticipated or anticipated closure, they should be having those conversations, but whoever is overseeing them should be providing some guidance or support to those conversations. You want to have some kind of clear policy that's coming down. So particularly in the instance of a unanticipated closure, you want to make sure that you have some system in place that bridges that young person into whether they're being rematched with someone new, if there's no one available, what is that going to look like? As well as if they are anticipated, we want to make sure that we're providing the mentor or mentee a framework to have those types of conversations. So you want to make sure that, in the event of unanticipated closures, we want to make sure parent guardians are notified. You want to make sure that they know as soon as possible so they can kind of help mitigate any negative impact as well. So as soon as the program manager is aware that there's some type of unanticipated closure, we want to make sure the parent guardian is notified as well. And sometimes as well, it might be appropriate to notify a school if it's a school-based program that an external agency is providing or something like that. Thinking about who some of those folks and extra support systems might be. So, as the mentor, you want to be going to the program manager, ideally having some type of policy and procedure in place. A parent and guardian should be notified, and then you all agree on what that time is to tell that mentee. We want to make sure the young person is transitioned as neatly as possible into a new mentoring relationship. Ideally, they'll be rematched with someone and be able to kind of transition in. And what we don't want to have happen, and we'll talk about this a bit more at the end or later on, but what we don't want to have happen is that the closure in this relationship becomes something that is a point of stress or trauma or any more anxiety inducing than it needs to be. And so if everyone's on the same page going into that conversation, the mentor, parents and guardians, program staff, we're able to have that conversation in a way that's as supportive as possible and reminds them, you have this support network, you have these people who are here to care about you, and this is what it looks like. So establishing a timeline. So you want to decide on an end date. You want to make sure that there's some sort of end date in place so that it's not nebulous. You want to provide structure. You want to provide a really solid sense of what to expect. For young people who are dealing with closure, especially, again, we want it to be as untraumatic as possible. For a lot of young people who are in mentoring programs, they may have experienced higher levels of trauma in their relationships prior to coming into the mentoring program. And so most of their interactions and experiences with relationships ending have been a traumatic experience because that's just what's been modeled to them. It's, parents and family members coming in and out of their lives. It's transferring from school to school. It could be any number of things. And so what we want to make sure we're doing is making sure that this change of relationship is really modeling for them what a non-traumatic school or non-traumatic relationship closure looks like. Because I think if we think about it in terms of, I think for me, I think back on friends that I've had in certain seasons of my life. There are friends that I had when I was younger, when I was in college or in high school that I don't really talk to anymore. And it's not because there was a falling out, but, we went different ways. We separated from each other for whatever reason. And that's okay. That can be a normal part of just the human experience is that relationships come and go. But if your only experience with relationships coming and going has been dramatic and negative, it's going to be harder for you to be able to process things like this positively. So, thinking back to what we were saying before with, how you build that team up to manage that transition is crucial. And then coming into the importance of scheduling a timeline is that the more we can provide young people with structure and what to expect, the easier it is to avoid this experience becoming traumatic, right? That we have, we build those expectations. I don't want to get too deep down like the trauma rabbit hole. I did a webinar about trauma recently, and I think it was recorded and it's on our channel that I'll send you with recordings later if you want to watch that if you weren't able to attend. But a big part of managing that is providing people with clear expectations and follow through on what we're going to do. We want people to be going through the mentoring experience, feeling like they know what's coming up next so they can, kind of mentally prepare for it. What we don't want them to do is be sort of metaphorically walking into a room without knowing what's inside and not knowing if it's going to be, I don't know, sunshine and rainbows, or if it's going to, be, I don't know, something horrible either. You want to tell them this is what's in the room. So that's why you want to decide on an end date and have a clear timeline and have it be realistic. So if the mentor is saying, I just got this job, I'm moving out to California in a month, then you know what is the realistic time frame they can commit to providing some of this closure. Can they still meet with them a few times so that they can do some sort of structured goodbye? Are they saying, towards the end of this year, I won't be available, or is it like tomorrow I'm gone and I can't commit to anything anymore? So you want to set that end date, and hopefully the mentor can be part of that transition as much as possible. Obviously, in the event of unanticipated closure that is at the result of us having to fire a mentor, for lack of a better term, that can be a little bit different, but it's the same idea. Scheduling those exit interviews, and so again, hearing from the mentor as they're leaving about what their experience was, what are they doing, especially if they're kind of something that happens a lot too with mentoring programs with mentors that might feel like unsupported, and they might leave the program partway through the year, and then what happens is we just don't know that going in and coming out of it. And so we want to make sure there's some type of exit interview. I'm trying to think of like the best way to say it. Multiple mentors, like if there's a lot of mentors leaving a program midway through the program year, that can be like a major red flag that there's other stuff going on. And so if you have a number of mentors that are really not finishing the year, if your retention is just very low, you want to know exactly why, right? You want to at least get as much of a sense as possible about what is going on, why am I having a hard time with this retention, and doing exit interviews is going to be able to help you with that. If it's just a case of one mentor, at least getting some sense of about feedback about your program, what they experienced, what they didn't, is always valuable. But it's just particularly valuable if you notice a pattern of low retention. Those exit interviews can be really, really crucial in giving you a little feedback. Again, planning, so I talked about this before, planning events leading up to termination. So before that is gone, if you were able to, if the mentor can stick around for a few meetings and be able to spend some time with them, then that's great. If not, then, it's understandable, but, planning some type of like, even if it's unanticipated, some type of like graduation or closure ceremony can be really helpful, or at least being able to spend a little extra time with their mentor before the relationship has to end. And again, if we think about this in terms of developing a closure policy for even like anticipated closure, so if we're thinking about, say, a school year-based program, and we decide on that end date in June, then we want to make sure that there's a few months ahead of time where the mentors are able to talk to the mentees about closure. It's the beginning of May, in about a month and a half, the program's really going to end and we're not going to be seeing each other. How do you feel about that? I've really enjoyed our time together. I'm feeling a little sad that we're not going to be seeing each other for the summer, but hopefully we can, pick back up in September, or, whatever. We want to make sure that the mentors are equipped to have that conversation, because what we don't want to have happen is, say your program ends June 20th, all of a sudden it's June, 10th, and the mentor and the mentee have not discussed the fact that, in 10 days, they're not going to see each other again, perhaps at all, as part of the program. And they're both just sitting there with this big elephant in the room that no one wants to address, and it can be very stressful. So, again, even in that context of an anticipated timeline, having that end date, what is the realistic timeline leading up to that you're going to be able to have the mentors that are going to be able to provide some of the support and the coaching and the hand holding in order to make it feel or like at least a somewhat positive experience. Exit interviews, like I mentioned before, and then having events, especially if you're running on some type of calendar year or school year where like we're ending in June or December or whatever, having some type of like culmination event is really powerful and makes it really signifies not just closure but like growth, right? Like we graduated through this program, we achieved and accomplished something, because sometimes it can be really hard for us to look back and see how far we've come over the course of like a year. And so some type of graduation culmination program to highlight the growth that we've made, the relationship that we've experienced, even if they're going to stay matched with the same people the next year, some type of kind of annual um, recognition ceremony. And again, we'll talk about that. So here's another opportunity for the chat in the question box. Think about a time in your life when someone left and you never were able to see them again, and you never had a chance to say goodbye. What did that feel like? Open the box. The answer is coming. Got one or two answers. I'm gonna wait for just a couple more. I'll give them about 30 seconds or so. All right, I see a lot of common themes, so I'm just gonna draw out a couple. That feeling of no closure, right? It left kind of a void or a hole, that it was traumatic. I still think about them and wonder how they are. Another person that they still think about them. I see a few common themes around lack of closure, so that's topical. I think those are some pretty common feelings. Thank you guys for sharing that. All right, let's get back to the slides. So, as with the end of all relationships, mentors and mentees are likely to have mixed feelings. If the relationship ends prematurely or on a negative note, either the mentor or the mentee might feel angry, rejected, or even depressed or guilty. We just get all the, I just miss things when it's multiple bullet points. So I like to get them all out. So for young people who might have, already fragile senses of either self-esteem or, have experienced a lot of that negative relationship closure like we talked about, the end of that mentoring relationship might reinforce those attitudes of worthlessness or hopelessness, right? So if we are dealing with young people who have already experienced these things and started to internalize them, premature or negative relationship ending with a mentor is just going to reinforce that. This is someone that's supposed to be a supportive member of my support team for life, and they're they're bailing on me too, and that can be really tough. So working with the mentors to identify some of those natural emotions, such as grief, denial, resentment, and helping them express it. And so, to help the mentees express those emotions about the relationship ending, the mentors is a really good opportunity for the mentors to model, appropriate behavior and saying, like, it's okay to feel sad about this. Like, I know you can be frustrated about this, or really just modeling and expressing some of their own personal feelings about it, and modeling that it's okay to have that conversation and to feel those things, and that's not a bad thing. Mentors should first express their own feelings and emotions about the end of the relationship, and let the mentee do the same. And providers and program managers and professional staff really reinforcing the message that closure is not the mentee's fault, right? Again, from that trauma-informed perspective, we want to make sure we're minimizing any sense of potential blame or shame around this, right? That this is something that happens, and it's not the mentee's fault, and we can provide some support through that. But that the way they're feeling of frustrated, angry, potentially abandoned, that can be okay. Even in the event of a really, long-term planned closure that's not unanticipated or early, these feelings can still arise. I found in my own personal experience as well that for mentors, for mentees, a lot of young people, they might grow a lot more attached to the mentor than they ever expected when they were getting into the program, or ever really wanted them to allow themselves to get that attached to them. And so that particular sense of closure of, the relationship ending and the stress and the sadness and the grief that comes with that, of the mourning of a loss of this relationship, combined with this sort of frustration and anger with yourself for like even letting yourself get that close to someone, particularly for a lot of young people who, again, have not had a lot of positive adult relationships in their lives before, that can be really tough. So celebrate. So a lot of times mentors think that they're leaving are going to have little to no impact on the mentee. Um, Not necessarily because, and I think that sounds kind of like negative, but it's because they don't see the positive impact they've had on their mentees. And so it's really up to the program coordinator to illuminate the contribution they've made to the mentee. We want to really make sure that towards the end of the year, the mentor is be able to just, mentoring in general is one of those things that we rarely get to see the impact of that we make on young people. A lot of times they don't sort of manifest for, years down the line, and mentees themselves might not even recognize it in themselves for quite some time. And sometimes it's not always as simple as, oh, my grades went up this year and that's great, or I attended school more, although it does happen. So, what we always recommend is that the mentor and mentee jointly decide on an experience or an event that will celebrate the time they've shared together. So thinking about a experience or activity or a location that they always talked or about wanting to go to but haven't yet. What was the best day they had together? Maybe we can relive that. Things like that can be really, really powerful. Encourage matches to make that really concerted effort to create that positive finale for their relationship. They want to, we can create our own, especially if your program has some type of like curriculum or something like that, then, doing that sort of graduation and group event can be really powerful because, they've gone through this thing together. But especially for one-on-one matches, combining that with a very personal and specific event for the two of them to engage with is going to just magnify the impact of the relationship, and really celebrate the bond that they've formed together. So as program managers or people running the program, our job is to make sure that we're giving the mentors the language, the space, and the tools that they need to work with their mentee on building that. Because as adults, even we're not great at navigating saying goodbye to people, most of the time. So we want to give the mentors the skills to have that conversation with the mentee. All right. So with a lot of, just like with a lot of other developmental skills, it's up to the mentor to role model gratitude. A lot of times what happened, and I think too often, mentoring programs assign mentees the task of writing thank you letters, expressing how much they appreciate the time the mentor has volunteered for them. While the practice sounds like a lesson in gratitude and appreciation, I don't know that it's ultimately that effective. Rather, I'd rather see that mentors write thank you letters to their mentees, explaining what they got from them and time they spent together and what memories they will take with them. So, you want to be the example, not the critic. And so, role modeling that positive goodbye, saying thank you, is a lot more powerful than forcing mentees to write thank you notes for their mentors. We want to make sure we're centering young people and centering the mentees and the experience they get from it. And so this is just another way to be able to do that. And I think there's definitely something to be said for keeping, we want mentors to feel like they had a positive experience too. But for mentors, the reason they come to the mentoring program is to give and build that relationship with their mentee. And so just the practice of writing that thank you and thinking about what they got from them heavy storms on the way, is going to be really powerful. So role modeling that gratitude to the mentee is going to be a lot more powerful than I think what I've seen a lot of programs do, which is basically force the mentees to write thank you letters to the mentors, which can be nice too if the mentee wants to do that. But again, approaching it from the perspective of how do we model healthy and positive relationship closure. This is just a really great way to do that. And finally, the program manager or program director and professional staff will be responsible for helping the mentee deal with the feelings of loss. Let me just get all of that here. As the professional, it's our job to try to normalize whatever it is that mentees are experiencing, right? We want to encourage and we want to listen. We want to allow space for negative feelings before we start to construct a positive narrative for the mentee to focus on. So we want to be there to encourage them and listen to them and allow them to, be angry, be frustrated, be sad, before we immediately just kind of hop in and say like, no, think about the great times. We don't want to just redirect them. Part of that, growing and establishing healthy adult relationships is understand it's okay to feel frustrated and anger and mourn the loss of relationships that we once had, and that's important, and it's an important part of growing up. We want to point out, new opportunities. So whether it's a new match or some new experience. So if we're matching them with a new mentor, or if there's maybe another program that they might be beneficial for, might benefit from, then that's another way to, kind of providing that sort of warm handoff, either internally with a new mentor or externally to a new program, or something like that can be really helpful as well too. And being really following the mentee's lead on some of that too as well is really powerful. We don't want to just force them to work with a new mentor just because we think they should. We want them to feel like they're buying in and they're part of this. And lastly, helping them build on their strengths. So really helping them look back on the past time they've been with their mentor, what great things have happened, how they've grown since then, and build on whatever it is that they've identified as strengths through that process with their mentor. So that's the bulk of it. I'm going to go over a few things. Finished a little early today. This is one of our shorter ones. If you do have questions, now is the time to write them. Again, we try to keep these pretty high level to be pretty useful for lots of different programs. But if you have specific questions about your program or the population that you serve, please include them. So we talked about how and why closure occurs. We discussed who should be first to know and why. We talked about how to identify a realistic timeline for ending a match. We talked about the importance of creating a space and a place for both mentors and mentees to process their feelings about closure. We determined that every match deserves to be celebrated. We talked about the importance of role modeling gratitude and setting new goals. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in. Otherwise, what I would hope you could do before you leave, if you take your phone like this, you pull up the camera and point at the little QR code, a little button will come at the top and take you to a SurveyMonkey link where there's just a brief survey. I'll leave that up for another minute. And then in a minute, I'm going to switch to our contact information so you have that as well. But again, in the meantime, feel free to put any questions, you specific ones you have. You will all get the slides to this as well as a link to all of our recorded webinars. We do also provide individualized supportive services to mentoring programs. So if you want individualized consultation with myself or a member of our team, you can note that in the survey and we'll reach out, or you can shoot me an email. My email address is right here on the right. I don't recommend calling that phone number because no one's in the office right now, but email is a great way to get a hold of us. So I'll give folks no questions yet. I'll give you folks another couple minutes to type any they have, and then we'll close up for the day. All right. Well, I don't see anyone popping any questions in, but if you do have any, after this, like I said, I'm gonna send an email with at least the slides and a link to the recordings and everything. And so feel free to reply to that with any specific questions or shoot me an email. And I appreciate you guys all coming out today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.